Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. I am Nick Kanoki, Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm very excited for our conversation with Kimon Onuma, President of Onuma Inc. Before we get underway, we want to thank ALN Platinum Organizational Member, Onuma Inc. and Onuma System, and all our patron members, as well as our organizational members for making programming like this possible. And if you're interested in working with us, please reach out. We'd love to talk about how we can work together to improve mission success. And today's program, we'll hear a lot more about this upcoming event. It is happening tomorrow night Eastern time and is in coordination with the American Institute of Architects Japan chapter. So very exciting upcoming event. And without further ado, I think we'll get into it. Just would say that if you're out there watching, we would love to hear from you. So please send any comments, questions, or feedback to the chat, or you can use the Q&A function of this Zoom webinar. Mike Bordenero, Executive Director of the ALN, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. How are you doing in Lander, Wyoming?
Good. It's raining, which is unusual for us here, but that's
good. We need some rain here in Chicago, but please stick around, Nick. You're right. This is a very special program. Kimon Onuma is a leader in BIM, and now he's a leader in artificial intelligence in the building industry. And actually, the building industry is an example for all industries. And we'll get to Kimon in just a second, but I want to make a statement about artificial intelligence. It is blowing up all around us. And the main thing I'm hearing is fear because of how fast this is happening. And we did a program, a series of 3 web workshops with Kimon earlier this year, which allowed Kimon to present his first foray into working with artificial intelligence to help the design and planning process. And it was really a breakthrough event. And we're honored that he built on that to be able to present to the American Institute of Architects, not just the Japan chapter, they're broadcasting this all around the world. So the American Institute of Architects in Chicago will be in the United States will be watching also. And I've had the privilege and honor to be seeing what he is doing to prepare for this. And that's what this presentation is a preview of what's going to be happening. And it is stupendous. The growth from April 12th to now in the tools and the way Kimon has learned how to use them is amazing. And Kimon has always been focused on open standards and sharing and raising the bar for everyone to make the world a better place. And his activities are showing what's possible, not the scary part. Yes, there's, fire is a technology. It can burn your house down. Does that mean we don't use fire? No, it can heat your house. It can cook your food. It's how you manage, how you govern the technology. And Kimon is openly sharing processes that many companies would keep as proprietary and competitive advantage. But Kimon has always had a mentality of everybody needs to do this to improve the world. And we're really honored and privileged to learn from Kimon and have him show us what he's up to. And we're going to do this in a dialogue fashion. There's going to be a little exercise that you can do, but Nick has agreed to be the guinea pig. Please feel free to chat, ask questions. If there's something that you're interested in saying yourself, we're definitely going into overtime this session, and we can promote you to panelist. So enough of that. Kimon, thank you for joining us again. How are you doing?
Great. And thanks for having me back to tell you what's been happening the last few months.
So why don't you do that? Why don't you tell us, basically, we usually start with, how did you get where you're at in your asset management journey? So we're going to change that just a little bit and say, Kimon, how did you get where you're at in your artificial intelligence journey?
Okay, so I'll tie it back to assets. You're talking about being afraid of fire, and I think we're cooking with fire now. And what happens is fire likes fuel, and asset information or the data about assets is the fuel. How about that?
Highlights already.
Since we talked about data as an asset a few years ago, right? It's been going on for several years at the Asset Leadership Network.
2016.
Yeah. So the opportunity I saw, because we've been dealing with data for a very long time, and in the building information modeling world, management world, data has always been central to this. But what's been missing is machines being able to use that data very efficiently. Obviously, we've had tools that do things with that data, but now with AI, I immediately saw the opportunity, because we have a lot of data in the systems that we've been building. If we connect the dots between that data and AI, what can it do? And that's what this exploration started as. What else can we do with this data? Because a lot of this data crunching, as we know, is not the fun things to do. You have to kind of be able to analyze, get patterns out of it. And I'll touch on it toward the end here. I want to show what we did with CMMS and facility management data when we fed it questions into AI. And I want to stress again that this is still the very beginning. Even though we've been doing a lot and exploring a lot, there's still issues, there's still challenges, but there's so many opportunities. And I agree, we can't be afraid of it. Otherwise, somebody else will do it for us. So that's why we're here.
So when did you first start playing with AI, and which program did you use?
It was over a year and a half ago, I think. With we started with the image generating, Dolly and Midjourney. We tried a few other ones back then. They were kind of interesting and they produced some interesting things, but then I hadn't touched it for about, I don't know, 6-7 months. And I decided to open it up again after I started testing ChatGPT. And I was kind of blown away at the quality. I've been kind of watching it on the sidelines, but you can really get kind of hooked into it. So I said, okay, I'll leave that alone for a while. But then when I came back to it, it's pretty interesting. And that's where we started exploring the connection. As an architect, obviously it's important to kind of tell the story, and telling the story is about having imagery connected to the information to be able to tell the story of this building, this city, this asset. And that's what got us back into it again.
So is your office nice enough that you can stop blurring your screen? Because there seems to be a lot of slowness in your.
Yeah, I think I can, let me try. There we go. You see all my stuff in the back here, but
yeah,
it's
okay. Anyway, the BIM storm that we did earlier this year, you showed the programming aspect of what ChatGPT could do. Instead of having, why don't you give us a little overview of what you did with us in the early part of this year?
Yeah, so this was from April 12th. You see my screen, right? Yeah. So it was with the ALN.
That was the third of 3 workshops, and that was the final presentation on the 12th.
Yeah. So the theme was asset management, architecture, construction, digital twins, and machines. So we said, okay, what can we do with that? We did a lot of prep work, and we wanted to use, industry standards, ISO, all that stuff. So all of this is foundational to it, but that's what's also interesting with AI. It almost can go into the background because you don't have to constantly be worried about, it's back there. So you're using all the standards and the data. And we created a script, which was a database. Here are the things that we're going to do. Then we started experimenting with, okay, if we ask questions of our machine, the machines that we have, which are generating spaces and assets like an Amazon shopping cart. So we said, okay, let's go through and do that exercise. Okay, imagine instead of having to go pick out which spaces do you need for a clinic, what if we ask AI, ChatGPT, to do that? I'm kind of zooming ahead here because we're not going to show the whole thing, but basically we said, okay, can you store this data table that we're going to give you? So you're not just going to go randomly on the web and find out what a clinic is. We're going to give you the the parts, the data that says this is a clinic, and it's literally just kind of a list, a flat table, spaces and everything. And then we said, can you create a clinic with that data? And as we're going along, and this is important, and this is still happening too. It's really fast, but it makes mistakes too. So you still need to be able to have that dialogue. And that's the part that's really interesting for this and for the imagery exercise. It's a back and forth, just like I was talking to a consultant. In fact, there was somebody that commented, oh, we can't trust ChatGPT because it hallucinates. And my position is, well, we have a lot of consultants and owners that also hallucinate sometimes too. And I also hallucinate sometimes or imagine things. So we all have that mistake factor that we need to be able to watch out for each other. So that was a takeaway, I think, and it still is, and it should always be. But AI is getting smarter and smarter. So I'm trying to imagine where it's going to go next. So anyway, we had this conversation back and forth. This is me asking it questions. The green is the responses, and they were starting to get progressively more and more detailed. And then I finally said, okay, I agree with what you gave me. Now create a clean table of what needs to go into the clinic. And then I said, okay, now let's take this table and import it to our engine, our machine, and ask our program to BIM tool to look at the data that chat was coming out, look at the BIM and the programming data that we have, and create a list of all the spaces with all the assets inside it, all the medical equipment. So that was kind of the first, and then we did a lot of other stuff. Okay, now we had to lay it out, now we need to do cost estimate, and now we need to take it into life cycle. And then we even layered in the microgrid exercise on top of that, because the previous ALN session from last year was about designing a microgrid. So we had engineering data that we fed into it and say, here's a list of microgrid data. What do we need to support a microgrid? And then it went on from there, total cost of ownership. So this whole mural kind of captures the steps that happened. And there's a lot of things kind of spinning off of that. And we left off with, okay, now let's take this a step further and see what we can do with it next time. And that's where we are now.
Okay, so if you could stop sharing your screen now.
Mm-hmm.
And let's use Nick as the student. We're going to ask Nick to summarize what that first set of exercises led us to. And you just had the little preview. Nick has been involved in previous BIM storms where he has personally checked how many exam rooms he wants, how many waiting rooms, how many bathrooms he has selected from the Amazon shopping cart. But now he's been replaced by ChatGPT. But how does that make you feel, Nick, as a participant in the design process?
Oh, I feel great, Mike. I don't feel replaced at all, only freed from my prior mundane obligations that now the artificial intelligence can do for me to free me up for higher level tasks. It's awesome.
Nick gets an A. That's exactly the whole concept of that process. And the beauty of it was Kimon has that down enough that he was able to have that discussion with a machine, because he's been doing that with clients and with us as students all along. So then, Kimon, what did you want to add on to that very fundamental planning, massing model layout? How did you want to expand on that for your architect colleagues?
Yeah, so the next step, so if you think of that as kind of coming from the inside out, because inside the clinic and inside the building, there's need for a space for that asset, for that medical equipment to support that person in the space. And then it generates that massing model. How big a footprint do we need for that clinic? What's not there yet is the design part. So as architects, we're constantly doing this in our head anyway. We're going between kind of the technical requirements and the aesthetic and how it fits on the site, and a lot of other issues too, the connection to the environment, all that stuff. And a big part of that for architects is being able to tell the story. You're essentially creating a story to tell the client, for them to understand a vision that doesn't exist yet, to agree or disagree that, yes, we want to go in that direction. As you're telling the story, the data starts saying, well, here's how much it's going to cost. Here's the impact on the environment. Here's how many spaces. Here's a schedule, all that stuff. So that's what I wanted to do with AIA, kind of show that vision of what happens if we layer in storytelling and imagery on top of that data that's coming out of the requirement.
So with the AIA, or with the ALN, you were working in front of us. We
Yeah.
had 3 workshops. So for the American Institute of Architects, you've got 1 2-hour session. So how did you want to set up that 2-hour session? What was your goal of that?
So we've done quite a bit of prep, and it's called a Charrette in architecture, which is a workshop kind of working at the same time. But the Charrette prep work involved working with other partners and other industry connections to set the stage for the work in Tokyo. And what we're going to be doing in Tokyo is doing a few small exercises. First of all, introducing the concept of AI, because a lot of people kind of heard about it, but how does it connect to architecture? So we're trying to do that as a first step. I could show a few slides we're going to show tomorrow, and then we're going to go through a few mini exercises and show them some of the design process and the thinking that we've already done in preparation for the workshop tomorrow, and then invite them to give us input and have a dialogue about, okay, how else can we do it? Can we try different, in Mid-Journey, it's called a prompt. In fact, it's called prompt engineering. I don't know, you guys have probably heard this. It's a buzz in the industry. You use prompt engineering to talk to the AI. And Steve Hagen made a very good point, who's presenting with me. He's an architect. Well, it's not just for the engineers, this is also architecture. So we're prompt architects. We're asking questions to AI from an architectural perspective. And that's where the imagery comes up. And the other key thing between the imagery, the storytelling, it still has to relate back to the actual data and the asset information that we looked about earlier. And I think the asset leadership sessions are really interesting because from a leadership perspective, it's about the owner's voice, right? What do you want? What do you need? And architects like to listen to owners, that's the client. So I think that's the interesting connection there. We heard the requirement. Now we're going to work on the design, and then we're going to have the dialogue with the owners, and then we're going to actually finish the design and construct it and hand it back to the owner, that life cycle part.
So the one thing that's really wonderful about this is that there's a real site in Tokyo. The Tokyo Fish Market has been cleared, and it's a huge empty part of land right on the waterfront in Tokyo. And there's real program information that you're using and pretending like you've been hired to build on that site. So you want to show us what you're doing there?
Sure. Maybe I'll start with the site since you mentioned it. So what happened, let me see, I got to share my screen, I guess. So as I started working with our contacts in Tokyo with the AIA there, Richard Moriwaki, who I used to work with years ago in Japan.
Decades ago,
said, okay, let's do
come on.
Decades, yeah, it's decades. So I did the typical thing. He goes, let's do a charrette. I go, no, I suggest let's do a charrette. He goes, what can we do? He said, housing. Okay, housing. I said, where can we put the housing? Okay, let's look in Tokyo. It's hard to find a good site in Tokyo. So I just instinctively landed it in front of City Hall in a public park here. It's like Central Park here. And he goes, oh, you can't build there. That's a public park. And I said, well, find me some land. Okay. Well, he goes, oh, there's a site, because he's familiar. So we said, okay, we found a site near Tokyo Station, right? There's Tokyo Station, there's Ginza, there's a main rail lines here. And this used to be a fish market, so that you can actually see the remnants of the fish market here. In fact, they demolished it just last year. So it's an open site. It's a huge area. There's a train line running underneath it, under a subway. And so we picked this site, and then we started placing our program in there. So there's a big site. It's actually happening in Tokyo. I'm not familiar with the other teams that are working on it. We obviously did this in a very condensed time period, so it's not a final solution, but it gets pretty close to being able to describe what's happening there on the site and to actually have the dialogue, which was our objective here, to be able to kind of go through that. So I can kind of walk through this just quickly, what we did. So we BIMstorm AIA. So we're playing on the AIA name there, but and the DNA of a BIMstorm, we're saying, okay, we have the owner requirements, which we just talked about, asset leadership network exercises that we did that drive the need for space. So we need to plan the site. So there's kind of an urban and smart city planning and digital twins. Then we have the design. We're going to focus in on one building We were going to focusing on a mixed use apartment, corporate housing that's rented out, which means that's a very specific requirement. Who has corporate housing means they need to manage not only the mechanical assets, they want to manage the spaces and the furniture and equipment in there as they're renting and maintaining the building. So that made it more interesting for us. And then we have design, construction, and handover, and we had CDV and Collectus, who we worked with. That was part of the prep work. What do we do with this requirement model that's coming out of this Amazon shopping cart that we started, that came from the owner, that went into quick massing and then handing it over to CDV to actually complete the design. And
CDV became a member of the ALN to start playing with Kimon in this virtual sandbox. So shout out to Cyril Verlet.
Yeah, and that happened really quickly. You introduced us, we started talking, and then within a few weeks we had a first version of this. And this is the first time we've actually presented. This is actually probably a milestone here, because we've been doing this, but we haven't shown it as much. Most of it's going to be shown tomorrow, but we can show more peeks of it today if you're interested in what happened with CDV and the work with them. And then we went into digital twins, because what happens once the building is delivered back, we want to track the space. We want to track the assets. We want to track the corporate housing rentals. We want to track everything that's happening inside it and being able to do the work orders. And that's the work order that Nick tried a few minutes ago, I think, of submitting a request of something's happening in this apartment. So I'll pause here and let you kind of reflect on this here.
Yeah. So Nick, why don't you give us a little summary from your perspective of what's happening here? Since you requested Kimon show this slide.
Oh, I requested the other slide.
Gotcha.
But I appreciate how Kimon lays this out, showing from inception to implementation, operations, and life cycle maintenance. It's really powerful just seeing how all the pieces tie together and use all these modern tools. Can include AI at a variety of points along the journey to speed things up, or just get a place to start from. Or even, we were hearing, it's really good at creating visualizations. So just that storytelling piece, engaging stakeholders, getting buy-in from people, really helpful to have images, and really helpful if you're talking about something that doesn't exist, to be able to create images quickly with artificial intelligence.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about process before we get to the sexy pictures, Kimon.
Okay. So the process, if we go back to asset management, I think this probably is familiar with a lot of ALN members. This is a simplified view. We're talking to the architects now, so I wanted to kind of really reinforce it's really about the owners driving the requirement. They need space for people. People need space in the building, which starts going into the building of the design and construction of the building, which is an asset. And there's been ongoing discussions in the architectural community there about, the physical parts of the building, but really the space itself is a big driver of, do we have enough space? Can we fit this stuff in there? Can we put people in it? And then managing it from a portfolio level. We need to be able to save time and looking at schedules for what happened in the past, predicting the future and what's going on today, to be able to track our current condition of assets, predict what's happening next year, when is it going to fail, look about sustainability. They're very interested in LEED. So we have a LEED checklist going on there, and then looking at a single building in a portfolio. So that was the process. I think my next set of slides starts going into the pretty pictures, but we can stop there. And
let's just go straight into the pretty pictures.
Okay. This is really abbreviated for what I'm showing tomorrow, but I need to first introduce what was ChatGPT. And I said, ChatGPT is essentially messaging. A lot of people in Japan also use messaging. So you're talking to a friend, how's it going, all that. But really you're talking to an AI. And you can ask the AI, like, can you create an architectural program for a 3-bedroom apartment? And this is the Amazon shopping cart that we talked about earlier. So I introduced this shopping cart already to them before this slide and said, okay, now imagine AI doing that shopping cart for you. So you don't have to go, well, I want this size apartment or that size apartment. I mean, that size bedroom. It starts kind of knowing that if you want kind of a mid-level apartment, what does it look like? The next AI that we introduce is Midjourney. Midjourney is the rendering engine. And there's a lot of controversy about this too, but that's what makes it interesting. It basically goes out, it's learned about what images are out there on the internet already. It's not just going and grabbing a predetermined image. It's actually saying you can ask it a question, like render a photorealistic view of a beachfront house in the Maldives from a house looking out to a beautiful sunset at the beach, and it creates this within minutes or 1 minute or 30 seconds or whatever. And you could say, well, I don't like the sunset there. I want it to be noon, or I don't want as much glass, or I don't want that wood deck there. I want a guardrail, or I want people on the beach. It would start regenerating it on the fly. And that's it's almost like a real-time slideshow. You can pretty much start asking it questions. So imagine sitting with the owner and saying, well, is this what you really want? And by being able to have that visual, which architects have used for forever, to be able to sketch or to do a rendering or do a floor plan, to be able to tell this is what you're going to be getting for this beachfront house. And so we started with the owner requirements, like I talked about, and we said, okay, that's the site I talked about. The other thing that we did with AI is we fed it a 43-page PDF document. Instead of reading the document, I was starting to read it, my head was spinning because a lot of these government-generated documents are not clearly written. But I fed it into the AI and I said, summarize from all these pages what you're talking about as far as buildings and program go. Okay, you want a hotel, you want a conference center, how big does it have to be? I said, summarize it and then give me some assumptions on how many floors and how many square feet. So I started building that. And then by doing that, I started knowing, okay, they want a waterfront entertainment and shopping area near the housing area. So this is a dialogue. It's almost like a script of what the owner's asking. So then I took this and I fed it back into the image generator and say, I want an eye-level view of a waterfront promenade, raised bank above the Sumida River in Tokyo at dusk. Next, a series of buildings with restaurants, entertainment. So you're really describing what you want there. And it started generating a whole series of these. And I just picked one of the best. We literally did probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 versions of this to get to one. And then we started combining them. So it's not just an automatic thing. You have to have that dialogue again just with your AI friend. Says, well, the river is too wide or too narrow, or there's too many buildings in the background, or we don't want sunset, or there's too many people. You start adjusting it and it basically rebuilds it on the fly, which is kind of mind-blowing because the level of detail it does is pretty amazing, but it does make mistakes. So for example, Mikey, I think you witnessed this the other day when we said we want a fish market or a fish restaurant or whatever. For some reason, fish triggers Midjourney to start putting fish flying around in the sky. So we have these big tunas all over the place. Oh no, not there, in the restaurant. Oh, not flying in the restaurant, on the table. We're going to eat these fish. So that's a hallucination part. I don't know where it got fish flying in the air, but there must be something out there that.
Well, it didn't have fish flying in the air. It had large taxidermy fish hung from the ceiling above the restaurant. And I have seen that in many restaurants. They have swordfish mounted on the wall, in fish restaurants. Yeah. So that's where it comes from. I thought that was perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, actually, the one that I experienced is I wanted this used to be a fish market, right? So I said, imagine a street that was a fish market, and there's stalls and restaurants on the street. It did that, but then it had fish flying in the air, just literally fish like birds.
Well, that's different than what we saw.
Yeah. I go, no, not that. Anyway, so that's the dialogue we had. Here's another view. Similar thing, we said eye level now. So the previous one was from above. Now we want eye level. Now we want closer with people. Now we want, I don't want that Ferris wheel in the background, whatever. You can keep on asking a question that just starts generating. And the reason these images are important, this is before the architect has touched anything. This is the rapid kind of a slideshow to the owner to say, do you want this? Do you want that? Building that? Okay, now do you want, we said a view from a spa, onsen is called in Japan, where you can sit in the hot water, you can look over the river. Okay, there's going to be a hotel with that or a spa with that. So we're telling the story. We want a high-end hotel looking at the river again. We want, this was a museum, this was a performance hall looking out towards the river as people were getting ready to come in. And that image that I showed you earlier was much more blocky. You can then start taking these images and say, this is where we're going to land them. Now we want somebody to design these buildings. This is exactly how architects think when they think in terms of master planning and getting kind of a sense of the place. How do we make that place? And what assets do we want to put in there? So that was a combination of using the imagery and using the Amazon generated program, which was also helped by AI because it crunched through the numbers to get us there quickly to understand how many floors of housing do we want here. I'll pause
Okay.
here. So
Yeah. So this is what's really important is when you combine Kimon's previous demonstration with the ALN of how to engage with Chat GPT to create a program for a building. We did a health clinic, but then for this current exercise, they did the high-rise housing. Then there is in Onuma system a massing model, and Kimon fed the massing model into the rendering system. So he is getting immediate renderings from a very realistic plan. And that allows owners to, on day one, understand how many rooms, what the cost will be, what the energy requirements are. We've got some people from the energy industry online. And could you imagine being able to plan on day one what all the energy requirements is for this however many acre system is with, you know, a score of buildings, and be able to understand what that means to your load and what generation requirements there might be. Also, there was a requirement or a discussion about a microgrid. Do we need a microgrid on this site? And those types of discussions can now start happening day one in a very real way. It all needs to be checked, but your planning is very accurate immediately. That changes everything about how business is done. It's not burning anything down. It's accelerating our ability to help manage the planet for the increasing number of people who are living here.
yeah, that's a great point. And if you look at these images, this is just 5 or 6 here, but we have hundreds of them. We literally just cycle through quickly. It's almost like you're having a conversation, just images start pouring out, and out of those we picked it. But each one of these images, if you were to render it manually or to have to even do a sketch of it, it would be hundreds of hours in some cases. But we're talking about minutes here. So it's, I don't want to say that it's going to reduce the time, because that's always a controversial thing when we start talking about time and projects, but it's really going to increase the quality because you're getting to that conversation much faster. And like you mentioned, Mike, you're also at the same time tracking how big is the building, how much energy is it using before you commit to doing the final construction documents. Because the further you get along in the decision process, the less chance you have, oh, we forgot that. Well, it's going to cost us too much, or it's going to use too much energy, or we missed that program requirement of needing more space on the top floor for the executives or whatever.
The schedule, it won't get here in time. We can't do that. Yeah.
Right. Exactly,
And what this does is drive a value of, or a discussion of value about all of these assets. Because if architects who are good at whispering to chat get paid for their time, they go out of business. We could not have the expertise of architects because Kimon would get paid $5 for this. So owners have to change the way they contract to a value-based contracting method. And they'll get more out of it if they start sharing the value that they're going to get from their assets as part of the contracting method. That puts asset management and the governance that ISO 55001 and 2 provide in a higher place in owners. So we're really focusing on the owners who write policy and who sign checks. And this will help them understand that they can get more of what they really want.
Yeah. So if we go back to the data as an asset concept that we started with, right? So we have data about owners' requirements that we showed with the program to BIM and the Amazon shopping cart. Then we showed how humans can use that data to rapidly build a clinic in the April event, right? Now we showed how AI can interact with that data to generate the same thing. Then we started showing what we can do with that information to start generating images. So it's all about that conversation between people and machines, right? Even before AI was around, we have other machines and applications to do it. The fact that it's machine readable means that you can start collaborating with other humans as well more efficiently, which is a part that interests me even more with the BIM storms over the years. If you have a table of data in an Excel file versus 5,000 pages of PDFs or text that I have to read, I'm going to spend a lot of time reading through that 5,000 pages, and you're not going to get any value because you have to pay me to read those pages. But now I can crunch through it, ask it questions, output the data, and start doing the design. That's the tectonic shift I think that's happening if we have access to data as an asset versus having humans reading through pages of paper that probably is outdated anyway to come to kind of conclusion to design the building. So I'm transitioning now to the work that we did with CDV next, because that's essentially a machine-to-machine collaboration, and the humans that are working the machines, in this case, are requirement data from the owners, and then CDV working with BIM to complete the design.
Oh, it's great that you're going to provide an overview of your work with CDV systems, which harvests BIM. It gets information out of the building information models for owners to use and value. But the audience doesn't have to understand it all in just this overview, because we are going to do a program later on about how Onuma systems and CDV systems interact.
Yeah, I'll just give the highlights. And the main thing here is that all that stuff we were looking at before, including the AI generated images, we want a building that is a housing building with a unit on the higher floor with a balcony that's glass so I can see through it to see the view of the river, for example, right? That's a requirement. We have a full massing model with all the assets inside it for all the space types that this owner wants to have in this corporate housing, rental housing. These are all the kit of parts like Legos. So we essentially handed that plus the imagery to CDV. We said, this is what we want to look like. We want to have some kind of do we want curves? Do we want rectangular? Do we, then we had the chat session that I showed you before about the program. And these buildings started getting generated, different types of buildings, before we handed it off to them. So this is the design part, the imagery plus the data, imagery plus data about interiors, furniture, imagery of a housing unit, imagery of the units. And now, by the way, we're tracking lead checklists as we're going through this, making sure we're heading in the right direction, because we need to give the engineers input on what type of systems should be going in, what should the cladding of the building be, all that stuff. So the massing model we talked about, the versions that the AI mid-journey engine took and created different versions of it, handed as a package, including the interior views of things. This is what we want it to look like. We actually described, this is kind of interesting aside here, we said we want 12-foot ceilings. We described this room in a narrative rather than in a blueprint or a CAD file. And then we asked the engine to render it. And then we adjusted when we said, okay, we want to see a glimpse of the kitchen, for example. There it is, a glimpse of the kitchen, the living room and the view. All of this drives instructions to the architects to fulfill this in BIM. And then we handed this whole package to CDV. And this is what they did. They have a lot of data in the background about requirements for how you collect and harvest data from the model. What do you do with the data? And then they started running it through by importing the model, the requirement model, into their system, and started designing the detailed parts of it, including the systems, the mechanical systems, the plumbing, to fulfill, to support the need for that kitchen or that restroom, the mechanical and the ceiling. Okay, here's another unit. Here's the details of that. Here's the requirement from the owner about
that was
type
the
of unit,
mechanical
3 bedroom,
system.
2
Go
bedroom.
back. You went there really quick. You said the details. And very specifically, that was the mechanical system, like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the requirement in the model was we need air conditioning in this unit. We want to be LEED platinum, so we want efficient air conditioning. What systems can support these? These are apartments, so they need to be metered individually or not. Actually, no, apartments would not be. It's the whole building. So it's that type of decisions. And then through CDV, they had all of these objects, intelligent objects with asset information and more detailed asset information that was added to it, and completed the building. Here's one floor of the 18, and every single floor is like that. You can slice through the whole building. Now there's equipment and furniture. This is just some of the floors, but then they inserted the floors, and then we gave them the imagery, right? The automatically generated AI imagery. Said we want it to kind of look like this. They made the decision, the glass handrail there on the balcony, and they even found potential mechanical issues that the shaft couldn't go through to the roof on one of the floors, so they had to move some of the units aside, for example. So it's not automated. It's all kind of that collaboration, which happened way before AI. This is a conversation between owners, architects, engineers, and
that was clash
so
detection was one of the huge benefits of building information models. And now you're combining that benefit of the building information model with the intelligence of the computer to be able to identify that. And you don't even have to be able to see that the structural, mechanical, and electrical systems have a conflict. Artificial intelligence is doing that now.
Yeah.
This will change the way business is done next year.
Clash detection has been around for quite a while. The difference here was that we were moving so fast with AI. So stack the building, do this, the massing. Okay, we checked everything. One thing we forgot to check was that shaft that needed to go through. And we said, oh, we want a bigger unit on the top floor. So we swapped out the top floor with another unit type without realizing that it wasn't checked. So that was because we were moving so fast. If we were going the traditional way, maybe it would have caught it, but we would have never gotten here that fast. And then while the architect in this case was designing it, they caught the fact that that shaft was there. So it could have been done with automatic clash detection, or it could have been a human that found it and said, we need to move this over. Okay, so the last phase is going back to the owner for facility management. Do you want me to keep going here, Mike, or how far do you want to? This is seeing the assets now in the build.
All right, so let's take a break here. I want to ask Nick something. If you can stop sharing your screen, let's let people cleanse their visual palette. This is very overwhelming. If you're just starting your career, Nick, what does this do? Does this scare you? Does this excite you? What's going on in a young professional's mind because of this new tool set?
Oh, fear is always present, Mike. But I think the smart thing to do is to be aware of what you're afraid of. And I really liked Kimon's point of saying, well, we're not really saying AI and this new process is going to drastically reduce the time it takes to do various things yet. That's a little controversial, but what it can do, what we've seen it do, is drastically improve quality with speed. And what that does is then provide more and more opportunities for iterations, for feedback from the owner, for feedback from the architects or the engineers. People just have more quickly or have something to work with from the initial idea and can get down into the weeds where they want to and find things that clash quickly and at the appropriate time. So we obviously still need, like Kimon was saying, we were moving so fast, so we didn't catch this clash that maybe would have been traditionally caught. We're moving into a new space. We need new processes. We're going to need standards on the subject to help people, cover all their bases.
Wow.
That will take time, but good stuff's happening already. And if you're being conscientious, I think you can leverage this tomorrow, or why wait till tomorrow, today, for whatever your next business project is. There's a way, there's a tool. Just go out and find it.
Standards, that's a real important concept, and it will be up to the owners to impose their standards of how they want to use this powerful tool set. And that's what I was relating to earlier about contracting. And OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, is in front of Congress saying there needs to be regulations on how this is used. We'll get into some of the ethical issues later, but really there aren't any. Don't be afraid of the ethics. Continue to work with your morals and just use the new tool set.
Yeah. One thing to add for standards is I want to just give a plug for the National Institute of Buildings standards as well, sciences as well. They're developing standards for digital twins and the integration between BIM and digital twins. And I'm on the data standards working group there, where we're working through these exact topics of, and actually a lot of it from a digital twin perspective, it focuses a lot on the asset management of systems, right? Real-time sensors, you have a city, smart building, all of that. So it's pretty exciting. It's all kind of coming together, but it's not going to happen overnight. But the standards development is ongoing.
Okay, go ahead, Kimon. Get us to the end.
Okay,
here.
you want me to show more? Okay,
Yes,
so let's
please.
get to the conclusion. So this is the final phase of getting back to the owner. Obviously, we didn't physically build this building. Everything else was a simulation, and we're simulating it. And then when you actually get to construction, it changes a different phase, right? You're going to the actual building is in the ground. Now the owner wants to manage their assets and systems in the building, and they want to do it from day one. They don't want to wait for a year to be able to do this. So we have this whole sequence of, okay, now how would somebody be able to quickly get to the information without being a technical expert? You still need some kind of a map. Just like a map of a city, you have a map of a building. You can click on things and find out what's going on with that air handling unit, or why is the air conditioner not working in this particular room, and we know what system's connected to it. So this is all the data that came from the initial requirement model, the BIM that we showed earlier, the mechanical that was put on the roof, associated with attributes about that unit. We even linked it to a sample sensor. It's a live sensor. Obviously, it's not in this building, but we have a live sensor that's saying what's the temperature or the air intake and outtake of that particular air handling unit. So the technician in the field can manage those assets once the building is in place. And we're going to do this live exercise tomorrow, but this is the one that Nick tried earlier. And the endpoint here too is all of this data that we've been talking about. It's not in a single application. Even though we've used our application here, the most powerful thing is being able to plug in different applications. So we used a lot of the Google tools. Power BI could also be used here, for example, but we have what's called an API that feeds this data out in real time. As things change, other applications can be built on top of it. And these applications have become much easier to build, especially if the data is machine readable. So we asked, this is interesting from an asset management perspective. We have another set of data about facility work orders and preventive maintenance that are happening on a site. And there's 35,000 work orders, for example. And we fed some of the data through the AI, and we asked it, give us a pattern of what you're seeing happening in this building. What do we need to improve? It started giving us an English version back versus tons of data saying, well, here are the things that you might want to look into. HVAC, auto shop is having a lot of problems. Here's some recommendations. You need some additional staff to do for HVAC, for example. And you can get as detailed as you want here, but this is the dialogue that now starts happening with the data about your assets, if it's available in a machine readable format that can be read by AI. And we end here with what's next, Mike. We don't have to cover that, but it's up to you.
My phone is ringing in the background, so I'm going to just talk over my ringing phone. There, it stopped. All right. So what's next? We need to continue learning about this. And with the asset management industry shifting very heavily to a focus on value, I think we are in a really good position to use asset management governance to help people calm their fears about this very powerful tool that will change business processes dramatically, very quickly. And one of the things that we've been learning in asset management is that the tools like ISO 55000, ISO 55001 work. The processes that they enable work. People are claiming the benefits. It's not about the tools and processes. It's about the human behavior. It's about the culture. And we can guide the world in learning how to use this powerful tool set in a positive way and not be afraid of burning the house down, that we can cook good food with this. Not saying we're not going to burn the house down. Some houses might get burnt down, but look at the history of the world. Moscow burnt down 11 times and it's still there. Chicago burnt down and it made us come back stronger. I don't want anything to burn down, but we need to use these. Kimon is so generous. He's already talking about this image here. This is a terminal, a request for a pedestrian ferry terminal at the site. And in order to keep the folks in Japan engaged and learning, he's going to be focusing on this as another activity to get deep into this. Now that is then going to help the ALN have an ALN Ports Asset Leadership Board series of workshops and a presentation in August. And we will take AI and digital twins and the governance power of asset management to the ports industry. John Arnott, who is president of ALN organizational member Trent Port Services, has connections in the port industry, and we're going to be introducing asset management governance of AI and digital twins into that industry and help them understand huge beneficial transformation that it can occur in their industry. And there's things that go on beyond that we have planned, but this is enough to get your mind around just right now. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Nick,
Yeah,
would you like to make any comments as we wrap up?
Oh, just that it's exciting, and I'm so grateful for the work that Kimon has done in this arena. I think, like you noted at the beginning of this discussion, Mike, AI is exploding. It's all over the internet and news feeds, and every day there's new tools leveraging artificial intelligence coming out, and it could be very overwhelming and could seem scary, or as someone mentioned, the men have become tools of their tools aspect. I think stuff like this helps us see the utility. It shows us where these tools can go to improve human life and the work that we need to do one way or the other. And so it brings the focus back to, well, why are we always in pursuit of more tools? They're shiny things, and those are nice to look at for sure and catch all of our eyes, but using them to better humanity and better the work that we're all doing is the goal here. And so really, really good to see examples of that. Thank you, Kimon.
thank you.
Yeah. This slide shows silos melting down. So thank you, Kimon, for reinforcing what asset management has been saying, is that we need to break down silos. And not just asset management, every industry has been saying that. And you show a path for doing that. Very much appreciate all the work you're doing and all the sharing you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And just to reinforce one thing, it's not any single tool that does this. It's a tool set or an ecosystem or a system of systems, is what the Digital Twins Consortium calls it. And it's really about the more that you can connect, the silos start breaking down. It's actually better that there are more tools instead of having one monolithic tool like it used to be. It used to be that you'd buy 3 things and very expensive to do, but now you can actually build, like I showed in the end. The tools become disposable, but the data asset is the asset that you need to maintain no matter what tool you use. And if you think in those terms, then it increases the value of that data asset and your physical assets too, because they're connected to it.
So we've got a request for an article for you. I've copied the email and we'll make sure that gets through. Thank you for the interest. And that concludes this formal part of the presentation. But Kimon, I'd like you to, everybody can leave. This is just our own production, and promotional aspect. Kimon, your role with the National Institute of Building Sciences and the Digital Twin Consortium is really important. So I'd like you to take, 30 seconds or a minute to state the, Kimon can stop sharing his screen, or he can share your screen. This is a commercial. Maybe you can start off saying what you're doing and then talk about, bring up a slide that you think is important. This is really working in front of everybody to give you a chance to have a nice highlight that you can share with the National Institute of Building Sciences, because the ALN wants to really reinforce that connection.
Yeah, so the National Institute of Building Sciences, NIBS, we've been involved with it with them for many years, and they're a standards organization, but they're also unique because they interact with industry, government agencies, government owners, large owners, and industry and technology. And they put out something called a National BIM standard, which is getting ready to be released, a new version. They've been working on it for years, and BIM's version 4 is coming out for ballot, actually, in about a week. It includes the whole life cycle. There's a lot of touch points to asset management. Within NIBS, there's a lot of long words here. National Institute of Building Sciences. Then we have the different councils. Then we have what's called the Digital Twin Consortium Subcommittee, which is it's a short task right now to look at the connection between building information modeling and management and digital twins. And digital twins essentially are really about going into the life cycle of asset management. And that's why it interests me a lot. And within that group, I'm involved with the data standards working group. There's different sub-working, so it's all tiers down there. So anyway, that's the part that I'm focusing on right now, is the data standards for digital twins and building information modeling. And we're looking for use cases and user stories, and we're putting together a short position paper that's coming out sometime soon. And we're looking to interact with industry on that as well too. I think my personal opinion is, this is my opinion now, there's enough there already out there to make this happen. It's not a should we do this, it's let's just do it. Let's just start somewhere. It's almost everything that I showed you here is kind of the vision that we've had for many years as well too. So
Okay.
Thanks for letting me introduce that.
Yeah. Well, we'll put something together. When I say we, that means Nick, help us build our relationship with the National Institute of Building Sciences. Yeah, and thank you for everybody for sticking around, especially those of you who are wanting to do articles on this. We'll make sure Kimon gets your email. And thanks for being here, sharing our excitement about this. Kimon, go knock them, can't say knock them dead, knock them out tomorrow. I'll be watching it from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Chicago time.
And it's being recorded, so we can play it back too. So you don't necessarily have to be there on it in the evening.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks.
And thank you, Nick, and thanks to the audience.
Thank you. Bye.